Hello, welcome back to Astro with Mary, and we're learning about astrology. We're just doing a little bit at a time just to keep things nice and fluffy and lovely, and we're not doing anything too complex because we don't want to do complex. Now today we're going to be discussing another planet that will turn up in your chart, and this planet is called Mercury. Now, Mercury orbits the Sun, so it's the planet that in our solar system that's nearest to the Sun's surface. And the way that it orbits, it doesn't orbit like a normal planet. It keeps one side of the planet very close to the Sun, so it gets burnt to bits, and the other side of the planet is nowhere near the Sun because it's the other side of it. So it's one side of it is nearest to the Sun, the other side isn't. So one side's boiling hot and the other side is freezing cold. And astrologically, we think of Mercury as being the planet that links us to the Sun. So when we're looking at the solar system, we've got the Sun, then we've got Mercury, and then we get to us, and then we've got Venus and Mars and all the others. So this is the planet that actually links us astrologically and astronomically to the Sun itself. Now, the nature of the way that it orbits, and we see the orbits from Earth, is that when you're trying to find out what sign of the zodiac your Mercury will be in, because it orbits around about the same sort of speed as the Sun does, in your chart it'll only ever be in the same sign as your sun sign, or one or the other either side. Now today we're going to be discussing another of our chart examples here, and we have Mark's chart, and his sun sign is Libra and his Mercury sign is also in Libra. Now it could be, if he was born a little bit later in the month that he was born, because he was born in October, if he'd been born something like he was born on the 9th, but had he been born a little earlier in the month, maybe about 3 days before, so say it'd be on the 6th of October, he was born in 83, his Mercury would be in the sign of Virgo, because on the date that he was born, his Mercury is 0 degrees and 15 minutes into the sign of Libra, so it's only just gone in there, and as I say, it travels around about the same speed as the Sun. So Mercury is a very, very interesting planet when we're trying to understand people and their birth charts. So go to astro.com. Now the symbol for Mercury looks like Venus, so it's a circle with a cross at the bottom, but it's got a funny little set of horns on the top. So that's the symbol for Mercury. It looks like Venus, circle with a cross at the bottom, but this extra bit of horns. So be careful when you're looking at a birth chart that you don't confuse Venus and Mercury. The difference between the two, they look exactly the same, is that Mercury's got a little set of horns on its head. And the symbol represents infinity, which is the circle with the cross, which represents Earth and the man, and the little horn at the top represents the sort of antennae. It's a form of communication. And in astrology, Mercury represents how you communicate. And as I say, your Mercury can only ever be in your own sign or the one either side of it. So in Mark's case, his Mercury could only ever have been in the sign of Libra or the sign of Virgo or the sign of Scorpio. So it's either in your own sign or the adjacent signs. Yeah. And as I say, in Mark's case, he has his Mercury in the sign of Libra, the same as his sun sign, so hooray, that's good, because it means that he can talk and communicate in a Libran way. Now it could be very easily, and it happens in my son's case, that his sun sign is Libra, but he was born much later in the month, so he was born on the 20th of October in 1993, so a whole 10 years later than our Mark, and his Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio, so there he is, being the nice fluffy loving Libra, but he's got an absolute wizard way of verbal attack. So people, when their Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio, they have a bit of the sting in their tail, so you have to watch out for that. So if you know any Librans that have got their Mercury in Scorpio, then do watch out, that they might seem lovely and fluffy, and then occasionally they come out with these right one-liners. You think, oh, that really hurt. This is what happens with me and my son. He doesn't do it quite so much now because I have pointed it out to him. So there we go. Your Mercury can only ever be in your own sign or the one adjacent to it, one either side of it. So say for instance you were born and you were a Gemini, your Mercury could only ever be in Gemini or Cancer or Taurus, because that's the signs that are adjacent to Gemini. Now the sign that your Mercury is in denotes how you communicate. You're a lucky little bunny if it's in the same sign as your sun sign, but you're going to be in heaps of trouble if it's not and it's in one of the adjacent signs. Now, in Mark's case, had his Mercury been in the sign of Virgo and been born a bit earlier in the month, there he would be in lovely fluffy Libra, but the Mercury in Virgo would have given him the tendency to be very particular about how he communicates. So rather than just saying what he thinks and feels, he'd be sort of really wondering about, well, should I say this and should I say that, and wanting everything to be perfect, because Virgo is the sign of perfection. So if you're a Virgo and you've got your Mercury in Virgo, you will want to communicate perfectly. So it won't be sufficient for you just to tell somebody what you think about them. You will do it in intimate detail, and I'm not saying it would be harsh, but would there be a lot of detail in there? Now the chappie that wrote now those lovely books, it's C.S. Lewis, I think that's right. He was a Virgo, had Mercury in Virgo, and wrote reams of books over the years, absolutely tons, and Tolkien as well. I'm sure he was a Virgo. I'm sure both those people were Virgos. I'll have to double check on that, but I know Tolkien because he wrote The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings chap definitely is a Virgo. And people that have got their Mercury in Virgo are pretty good communicators and tend to enjoy writing. So the sign that your Mercury is in is how you communicate. If it's in the same sign as your sun sign, then what you say is what you feel is what you mean. If it's in a different sign from your sun sign, that's where problems can happen. And it's amazing the amount of clients that I have that have some sort of communication issue will have their Mercury in a sign different from their sun sign. So whiz yourself over to astro.com, find your symbol, find your sign for it, and see whether or not it's, if you classify yourself as having a communication difficulty in some way. So people, possibly that have not so much Asperger's, but people that have now what is the word for it? Mine's gone blank. People have communication difficulties. They I think I've got communication difficulties today. I can't remember the word for it. So dyslexia, that's the one. People that are dyslexic and have dreadful memories. People that are dyslexic have dyslexia, so not are dyslexic. People that have dyslexia sometimes have their, well, not more than sometimes, quite a lot of the times, I'll have their Mercury in a different sign. And depending on what element it's in, so earth, air, fire, and water, is how they learn best. So in Mark's case, because his Mercury is in an air sign, he learns best by having things spoken to him, because the air is verbal. Earth signs, so that's Virgo, Taurus and Capricorn, feel better actually touching things, actually grasping them. So their method of learning is to do whatever it is that's necessary. They actually have to physically do the stuff. People with water sign Mercury, so that's Cancer, Pisces and Scorpio, learn best when their feelings are involved. So if you want to help somebody with a Mercury in a water sign and you're teaching them and you want them really to learn something, stuff a bit of emotion in there. So maybe if they're having to recite something dreadfully boring for school. I remember I learned a poem at school once. It was The Knights of Appledore. And it's got something mad like 13 verses, but I managed to remember all of them because I remembered the emotion suffered by the knight in shining armour in the particular story. So that helped me because I've got my Mercury in the water sign in Pisces. If you've got your Mercury in a fire sign, then you learn and understand things best when they're rapidly explained. So this is the signs of Leo, Aries and Sagittarius. You learn best with action orientated learning. So unlike the earth signs that have to do the stuff and do it slowly and hold it and feel it and kinesthetically whatever it, the fire signs learn best by action orientated things. So if you were to teach somebody that is a fire sign anything, get them to sing it, chant it, run it, jump it, add a bit of actual physical activity into their learning, so they learn best on the job. They can tend to pick things up pretty quickly too. I tend to think of the fire signs and the air signs as being reasonably visual, so they learn best by seeing things. The kinesthetic and so the earth and water signs, I tend to find more kinesthetic learners feel better for actually touching stuff, but that's just my personal opinion. You might not find the same thing yourself, but I have found that quite a bit in my private practice. Now, when we come to a later lesson, we're going to talk about location of planets. So if a planet is below the horizon or in the second house or whatever, we are going to discuss that. We're not going to be discussing that today, but your Mercury will be in a certain sign, but it will be located in one of the 12 divisions of the chart, and it's those divisions that we call houses. So just keep that in mind. We will come back to it in a later lesson. But your Mercury is about how you communicate, so find out if it's earth, air, fire or water, what your method of communication is, what do you prefer, and is it in the same sign as your sun sign? And if it isn't, then your learning style will need to revolve around the element that your sign is in. And it could be that you've got a child that you want to help learn and do better at something, learning the element of their Mercury, which might be completely from your own, does help an awful lot and will help teaching. Now, I did write a blog post about it ages ago, and it's called Don't Shout Your Child Might Be Kinesthetic, so you can Google that and you'll find it on my blog. Just Google Don't Shout Your Child Might Be Kinesthetic and the blog post will come up. So there's more information there about kinesthetic learners, people that need to actually feel, touch, taste, smell stuff while they're doing it. My son had a dreadful thing. If I was washing his clothes and they didn't smell right, it was, I'd have to put it back in the washing machine again. It's like, oh my goodness me, what do you mean it doesn't smell right? But it's their form of experiencing something is so touch, smell and taste orientated that you have to take that into account when they're learning. Now, if you found out all this information, do share it. If you find that your Mercury's in an interesting place or an interesting element or an interesting sign, do communicate that with a few people and see whether or not you can be understood better, because when people comprehend and understand your learning style, it makes life a hell of a lot easier. I mean, I must mention just briefly before I go, your Mercury could be retrograde. So next to your Mercury, on the little graph on the bottom left of the picture of your chart, it'll have the sign that your Mercury is in, and also where it's written in blue, the degrees and minutes of the sign, there might be an R next to it, and R represents retrograde. There aren't the sun can't go retrograde, the moon can't go retrograde, but all the other planets can. And when we say retrograde, what we mean is from the Earth, it looks as if the planet's travelling backwards at that moment in time. And it's equivalent to if you imagine you had two trains at a station and both of them take off and one of them accelerates and goes faster than the slower one. If you were in the faster train, it would look as if the slower moving train was actually moving backwards, when it isn't. It's travelling at the same, well, not the same speed, it's travelling slightly slower than yours, but it's not actually moving backwards. Well, that's the sensation from the Earth. If we look at a planet, it looks from the Earth as if that particular planet is travelling backwards. It isn't. It's just because we're travelling at a different speed to it, or it has slowed down its orbit or whatever. Now, if your Mercury is retrograde, forget everything I've told you. Your method of learning will be completely unique and different to you. I've got my Mercury in the sign of Pisces and it's retrograde, and I find that I learn things best by repetition, but sometimes also by using my intuition, sort of trusting, does that feel right? Does that make sense? Has that sort of got something going for it? So if your Mercury's retrograde, again, you might have problems learning, and I find I learn best by being self-taught. The best things I've ever learned I've taught myself, because I just feel that I am my own best teacher. And not to knock anybody that's ever taught me anything, because I truly respect their teaching of me, but I found that I learn things best when I teach myself, not because of my Mercury retrograde. I didn't know about it and until I got into astrology, but now that I am, I understand why. So if your Mercury has got an R next to it, it means it's retrograde. You will need to find your own unique way of learning that suits you, and then communicate that to people. Say, I learn better if blah blah blah, you do this for me, or you help me with that. So there we go today, just a little bit of information about Mercury. I hope you've enjoyed it. Do continue to subscribe. Make sure you've hit the subscribe button, then every week you'll get your edition on time. I apologise today, my edition is a little bit on the late side. It normally comes out on a Sunday, and I think I'm having a Tuesday today. It's all been rather busy here. If you want more information about what I do, please go to www.maryenglish.com. If you want to find my books, they're all on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and put my name in, Mary English. You can stick in the word Mary English astrologer. You're more likely to have my books come up. And it's been lovely chatting with you. I hope you're enjoying learning about astrology, and we'll speak next week. Bye bye now.